Brian R.Price is an American university professor, author, editor, publisher, martial arts instructor of the Italian School of Swordsmanship, Reconstructive Armor, a member of the Society for Creative Anachronism. He is assistant professor of history at Hawai'i Pacific University, where he offers courses in the history of warfare, in counterinsurgency, and in strategy at the graduate and undergraduate levels. Leveraging his long study of medieval topics and his recent experience in Afghanistan as an advisor, he speaks regularly at conferences both for his current field on counterinsurgency and in his earlier, and now secondary field, on chivalric topics. His page at https://hpu academia edu. Brian Price lists his current and recent research projects. He began his studies of medieval history in 1990, but began to shift his interests as the Afghan and Iraq wars progressed, increasingly emphasizing aspects of modern military theory, especially ways through which culture, doctrine and military practice interweave. This remains the center of his research agenda today. Recently he has spoken at the UK Ministry of Defence, appeared on television to discuss the situation in Ukraine, and given a paper at the World History Conference. Price is perhaps best known for his work, Techniques of Medieval Armor Reproduction, which has been favorably reviewed and sold more than 20,000 copies worldwide. It was cited more than 35 times in the recent 2013 Ph.D. dissertation by Nicolaus Duprez. Duprez writes, Techniques of Medieval Armor Reproduction is one of the most complete accounts written on the armor as art, geared heavily towards technique. It is intended as a manual which discusses the steps of armor making from design to fabrication. Though not comprehensive, the complexity of the task is well represented. Price originally founded the Chivalry bookshelf in 1992 to publish Chronic, the Journal of Chivalry, but eventually began publishing books about Western martial arts, arms and armor, and the subject of chivalry. The press produced 26 titles between 2001 and 2010, when Price suspended operations in order to prepare for deployment to Afghanistan. He and his wife, and also jointly ran Revival Enterprises during the same period, which developed a popular line of leather and sundries for reenactment and Western martial arts practitioners. Previously he co-founded the American Company of St. George, a medieval-style tournament society that, together with Chronic, the Journal of Chivalry, helped to inspire many other similar tournament societies throughout North America, in Europe and in Australia. Price is a co-founder and, until early 2011, was the longtime curriculum director of the Scholar St. George School of Historical European Martial Arts. Currently he teaches swordsmanship in Honolulu and remains affiliated with the Scholar St. George. Background: in 2011-12 he served in Afghanistan as a senior socio-cultural advisor for the Human Terrain System, working with NATO, American and Afghan forces. His work there focused on the Afghan National Security Forces, their internal dynamics and the relationship to American and NATO forces as related to counterinsurgency theory and practice. He made use of local and oral history techniques in his unique approach and gathered oral histories on ANSF officers and civilians. Price graduated from the University of California, Los Angeles with a B.A. in political science in 1990, and in 2006 entered the University of North Texas to pursue a doctorate in history. He won a competitive dissertation fellowship in 2010, completing his degree in May 2011. He taught courses that are new, and World History as a teaching fellow from 2008 to 2010. Price had previously operated an armor workshop, Thornbird Arms, from 1984 to 1990, and worked in the computer software, information technology and Internet industries from 1993 to 2000. Western martial arts. Beginning about 1981, Price's exposure to the Western martial arts developed through his participation in armored full-contact sport combat through the Society for Creative Anachronism in Southern California, in which he participated under the SCA pseudonym of Brian Thornbird R.Price, eventually rising to the rank of King of the Kingdom of Cade in 1988. In 1984, Price founded a small armory, Thornbird Arms, directed at the SCA's market for functional, historically accurate armor, which he operated until 1990. In recognition of his expertise in armoring and his research into the historical combat system of Fiore dei Liberi, the SCA Kingdom of Anstiora elevated Price to its Order of the Laurel in 1986, and in 1987, he was elevated to the SCA's Order of the Chivalry for his skill in SCA armored combat by the reigning King and Queen of the Kingdom of Cade. Price was awarded the Queen's Cipher and the Princess's Favor in 1992 by the Kingdom of the West, the Queen's Guard Knight Counselor in 1998, as well as the Defender of the West in 2000. Price is also a warranted armored combat authorizing Marshal at Large of the Kingdom of Anstiora. In addition to producing historically accurate armor for SCA members, Price wrote the instruction book Techniques of Medieval Armor Reproduction. This book remains the most popular introduction to the field and has provided a springboard from which a generation of armorers working in the medieval style have emerged. In the 1990s, Price was also instrumental in establishing the Company of St. George, a tournament company within the SCA dedicated to staging historically accurate tournaments and pardam in an SCA context. In 2000, a part of the Company of St. George developed into the Schola St. George School of Western Martial Arts, co-founded by Price and Robert Holland in Union City, California. Price directed the Schola St. George, expanding it to Texas and other regions of the United States and abroad. Currently the SSG has branches in Dallas, Atlanta, Charleston, Boston, Little Rock, Moscow, Latvia, in the San Francisco Bay Area, and in Honolulu. Under Price's impetus, the Schola St. George organized the first annual Schola St. George Medieval Swordsmanship Symposium in May 2001. It was one of the first conferences in the United States dedicated to bringing together scholars and practitioners of the historical European martial arts, and the largest of its kind up to the time. In 2004, Price was inducted into the United States Martial Arts Hall of Fame as a medieval weapons master. He is also a member of the American Teachers Association of the Martial Arts. In Afghanistan, he won letters of commendation for his service to both NATO and American units. Writing, editing and publishing. Price's early work included the Book of the Tournament, Historical Forms of the Tournament for SCA Combat, History, Resources, Examples, and Arming Yourself in the Style of the 14th Century, were written principally for the Society for Creative Anachronism and were sometimes published by the SCA as well. In 1996 and 1997, Price also contributed 2 articles on chivalric virtues and winning and losing, to Facets of Knighthood, an anthology of poetry, stories and articles concerning knighthood and chivalry edited by a fellow SCA member, Cormac the Traveller, and published by Outlaw Press. Price republished and expanded his 1991 monograph The Book of the Tournament as a book under his The Chivalry Bookshelf imprint in 1996 and, again, in 2002, in 1999, as a monograph and, in 2001, as a book. Price published his translation into modern English of Ramon Lull's Book of Knighthood and Chivalry, which became widely used as a textbook. The book was republished again in 2002 as a paperback by the Chivalry Bookshelf and Boydell and Brewer, and again in 2004 by the Chivalry Bookshelf and Greenhill Press. Price's Techniques of Medieval Armor reproduction was published by Paladin Press in 2000. In 2001, Price published the first U.S. edition of Bengt Thordmann's 1939-1942 volume Armor from the Battle of Wisby, 1361 as a single volume, and Secrets of German Medieval Swordsmanship. Sigmund Ringach's Commentaries on Johannes Lichtenauer's verse, translated and interpreted by Christian Henry Tobler. The Chivalry Bookshelf published several more notable works by other authors concerning the history of chivalry, arms and armor, Western martial arts in 2002, including The Art of Defense, An Introduction to the Use of the Rapier by William E. Wilson. De Arte Gladiatoria Dimicandi, 15th-century swordsmanship of Master Filippo Vardi, translated by Luca Porzio with a commentary by Gregory Meal. Jousts and Tournaments, Charny and the Rules for Chivalric Sport in 14th-century France, translated and with a commentary by Dr. Stephen Mühlberger. Spada, An Anthology of Swordsmanship in Memory of You at Oakshott, edited by Stephen Hand. That same year Price also contributed an article in the lists, The Arthurian Influence in Modern Tournaments of Chivalry, to an independently published anthology, King Arthur in Popular Culture, edited by Elizabeth S. Sklar and Donald L. Hoffman. From 2003 through 2006, the Chivalry Bookshelf continued publishing notable books concerning the history of chivalry and Western martial arts, including The Medieval Art of Swordsmanship, a facsimile and translation of Europe's oldest personal combat treatise, Royal Armories Ms. I.33, by Dr. Jeffrey L. Vergang. Medieval Sword and Shield, The Combat System of Royal Armories MSI 33, by Stephen Hand and Paul Wagner. Fighting with the German Longsword, by Christian Henry Tobler. The Swordsman's Companion, by Guy Windsor. The Art of Dueling, 17th-century rapier combat as taught by Salvatore Fabrizi, translated by Tommaso Leone. Spada II, An Anthology of Swordsmanship, edited by Stephen Hand. Teaching and Interpreting Historical Swordsmanship, an anthology edited by Price, to which he also contributed 3 of its 17 articles. The One True Way, 7 Iron, Please, and, in a few pages, Fighting Between the Post of Fiore dei Liberi. Deeds of Arms, Formal Combats in the Late 14th Century, by Dr. Stephen Mühlberger. The Royal Book of Jousting, Horsemanship, and Knightly Combat, a translation into English of King Domdwart's 1438 treatise Livro d'Ensinanca de Bem Cavalgatoda Sella, translated by Antonio Franco Preto and edited by Dr. Stephen Mühlberger. The Duelist's Companion, a training manual for 17th-century Italian rapier, by Guy Windsor. English Swordsmanship, The True Fight of George Silver, Volume 1, Single Sword, by Stephen Hand. Fighting with the Quarterstaff, a modern study of Renaissance technique, by David Lindholm, Academy of the Sword, wherein is demonstrated by mathematical rules on the foundation of a mysterious circle the theory and practice of the true and heretofore unknown secrets of handling arms on foot and horseback, by Gerard de Danvers, translated by John Michael Greer. In Service of the Duke, the 15th-century fighting treatise of Paulus Cal, translated by Christian Henry Tobler. In 2007, Price published Fiore di Liberi's Sword in Two Hands, a full-color training guide for medieval longsword based on Fiore di Liberi's Fior di Battaglia, which is also the most recent book published by the Chivalry Bookshelf. In February 2011, Price announced that there will be no further bookshelf titles except for my own, and there are only 3 of these planned, if they ever come out. In July 2010, Price published in Knight Templar magazine, Isn't Chivalry Dead?, a shortened version of the article he had published earlier in Chronic. In May 2011, his dissertation, The Martial Arts of Medieval Europe, was accepted by the University of North Texas Department of History and is currently in revision for publication by an undisclosed press. Between 2011-2012, he wrote more than 70 classified and unclassified analysis reports on topics relating to counterinsurgency efforts in Afghanistan. In 2013-2014, while developing more than 11 courses for Hawai'i Pacific University, he reviewed 4 books for the Journal of Military History. Controversies. In 2009, Drive. Yuri Cowan, a postdoctoral research fellow concentrating on 19th-century poetry, historiography, medievalism, and the history of the book, at Ghent University, Belgique, and a member of the William Morris Society, edited the Kelmscott edition of The Ordination of Knighthood for the Morris Online Edition, a web-based scholarly edition of the works of William Morris published at the University of Iowa Library's website. In the headnote, Introduction, Cowan accused Price of plagiarizing William Morris's translation of the Ordine de Chevalerie in Price's 2001 The Chivalry Bookshelf edition, but perhaps the most striking instance of the afterlife of this volume is a little book published by the Chivalry Bookshelf in 2001, entitled Ramon Lull's Book of Knighthood and Chivalry and the Anonymous Ordine de Chevalerie. This book is avowedly a work of enthusiasm by Price, who writes in his introduction that with the growing convergence between students of chivalric law, reenactors, Western martial artists, and medievalists, the time seems right to release this new version. I hope it brings much pleasurable contemplation and provokes thought along what it meant and what it means to be a knight. There is no reason why Price should have included both works together, except that William Morris had once done so in his Kelmscott edition of 1892-3. In fact, a close look at Price's edition reveals that he has stolen Morris's translation verbatim for the entire text of the Ordine, and gives Morris no credit whatsoever. Indeed, he does not mention Morris even once throughout his entire introduction, nor anywhere in the book. Although Morris's work is certainly in the public domain, Price's appropriation of it without attribution is a decidedly unchivalrous piece of plagiarism, and yet this lately pirated edition, too, is an example of the long reach of Morris's influence in unexpected places as a translator, as a medievalist, and as a shaper of the canon. In his introduction, Price repeatedly emphasizes the anonymity of the Ordine. It is possible that, owing to Morris's rather medieval humility in not appending his own authorial name to the translation of the Ordine, Price understood the translation of the Ordine in the Kelmscott volume to be Caxton's, suggesting at least that Morris's medievalizing idiom was convincing. The complaint, however, is misleading, whereas the cover of the book and the title page both name the book as Ramon Lull's Book of Knighthood and Chivalry and Amp, the anonymous Ordine de Chevalerie, without reference to any translators, and the indicia lists Ramon Lull's Book of Knighthood and Chivalry, translated by William Caxton, rendered into modern English by Brian R.Price. The back of the dust jacket does include a paragraph crediting Morris as the translator of the Ordine de Chevalerie. Further, the two were included together in this enthusiast's volume because they are discussed together in the first chapter of Maurice Gene's foundational work, Chivalry, a work that provided the underpinning for many of Price's early works.